As Billy Idol used to not say, it's hot in the Motor City. Welcome to another episode of Street Track Failures, where we're taking a look into the Detroit Street Circuit that was used by several high-profile series across the years of 1982 to 1991. Perhaps this track is best known for featuring 7 times on the F1 calendar. Of course, F1 is associated with being the most prestigious and demanding racing category in the world, racing on some of the most demanding circuits. Particularly back in the 80s when the cars were basically NASA rockets with wheels and spoilers added to them. These cars were a physical battle like no other. However, Detroit was an entirely different beast. An 18-turn track that was incredibly bumpy, tight, physical, humid, and temperatures that for certain Grand Prix would go over 33 degrees Celsius or 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, and they'd be doing this for over 60 laps, totaling over 150 miles and 250 kilometres. Other than that, it would be a stroll in the park for these drivers, teams and cars. So let's get onto the track layout itself, because there's quite a lot to cover in this one. Turn 1 is a long, sweeping left-hander. Even in F1 cars, it takes what feels like forever to get fully round the bend, patiently waiting to unleash the power. In terms of an apex to aim for, well, tough, because there really isn't one as such. The best line is to stay as close to the inside wall as you can without hitting the thing, otherwise you'll be seeing your mechanics quicker than anticipated. This is probably one of the better overtaking places on this track, which isn't saying much because I'll just cut to the chase. This track was very difficult to overtake on. In fact, this track had quite a lot of other similarities with the track based in the Principality of Monaco, some of which we'll come on to later. Now we start to get to parts of the circuit which are exceptionally narrow. Heading up to turn 2 on Atwater Street, you arrive on what is probably the only other reasonably plausible place on the track to make a pass on, just about enough width to fit 2 cars side by side in, and assuming the other car ahead doesn't defend all that heavily, you can pull a late braking manoeuvre on them up the inside. If you did make an error there, then there was a bit of runoff for you to use. However, this was a deceptively tricky corner by yourself. Whilst there is a bit of runoff on that corner, the track narrows up on the exit, meaning that it's very easy to clip the wall. If drivers like Alain Prost are struggling with it, then this is a sketchy corner. Up the hill you go towards turn 3, which is another 90-degree right-hand corner. No need to explain what these things are. If you've seen other episodes in this series, then they've more than likely been imprinted into your brains by now, for which I can only sincerely apologise. The track continues to incline in elevation up turns 4, 5 and 6. Turn 4 is practically non-existent, but on Chrysler Drive you end up at a double apex corner. Turn 5 is a slight kink that leads you to the 90-degree corner of turn 6. However, turn 5 is quite bumpy, which in these cars means it's quite easy to get the cars unsettled and thrown around, with the wall being the only destination. A tricky section for sure, yet with all that being said, if you're a fan of seeing cars and drivers tackle a difficult section of asphalt, then this would be a great viewing position. This though wasn't what the original course looked like. Turn 5 was originally a kink to the left, which then led to a very tight hairpin, before blending back to where the entry to turn 6 was. I'm glad this was changed because it does look pretty darn clunky and awkward. The course then ends up on Congress Street East with a period of wide track width, ending fairly quickly though. Slight right and left bends, which are so irrelevant that they aren't even classified as corners, lead you to another 90-degree left-hander. Although before we talk about that corner, not that there's much to say about it anyway, I do want to bring up the positioning of this fairly large temporary grandstand. It perhaps wouldn't be too bad of a spot to watch the cars from if it wasn't for the large amount of shrubbery in the eyeline of where the track is. I mean, it does add a nice aesthetic nature to the track. However, unless the camera view is deceptive, it does seem like a pretty pointless place to put a grandstand in. Either way, the 90-degree left-hander comes up next. Could be a potential passing opportunity. It would have to be an almighty last of the late breakers though. Another 90-degree right-hander follows before you head to a tunnel, specifically the Land Tunnel on Land Street. It doesn't take much time to go through the tunnel, but a tunnel is a tunnel all the same. Onto yet another 90-degree corner we go, this time turning to the left, and then another 90-degree corner to the right, onto a short straight, which leads to another 90-degree left-hander. Although if you went off there, at least you had 20 trillion rows of tyres to cushion the impact. Luckily there's only one more 90-degree corner left. before you head to the turn named Kodak Camera Corner, a slow right-hander that declines in elevation. A corner that's not too dissimilar then to the Mirabeau Basse corner in Monaco, just not quite as tight. A short burst of acceleration leads you to turns 14-15. Turn 14 isn't the important bit though. That corner is basically setting you up for the much more crucial turn 15, which is a sharp hairpin. It's important to get a good entry into turn 15, as the wider you can get the entry, the less compromised you'll be on the exit of the hairpin. Once you've completed the hairpin successfully, or at the very least got out of it moving in the right direction, the drivers are greeted with a second tunnel, a much longer tunnel this one, known as the Goodyear Tunnel. The turn 16-17 complex follows a very tight portion of track which is pretty much a chicane in slow motion. If I'm being honest, it's hardly a chicane at all, it's just two really tight corners, separated by not much distance. Only one corner left to go, which is my personal favourite on this track, even though the drivers apparently didn't like it. A quick left-right flick over a particularly bumpy portion of the track, where drivers would be having to put the most faith in their car's grip limitations. Now whilst it looked awesome on camera seeing these cars fly through there, it did break up what potentially could have been a longer straight, thus a longer run down to one of the better overtaking zones on the track, at turn 1. Would the track have been better from a passing standpoint because of it? Potentially, albeit I don't think the change would have been that dramatic. Also, a bit like Monaco, Detroit has a section of track that's very close to an area of water. It's not too far off being America's Monte Carlo. Like I said earlier, this was a very demanding track physically and mechanically. The brakes would be thoroughly put through their paces with the scorching temperatures and several heavy braking zones. The gearboxes were another component that was susceptible to breakage, due to the bumps and how the drivers were having to change gear at least 50 times a lap. The toll on these cars was enormous. Usually well over half the field retired from the race. The heat also caused tyres to degrade exceptionally quickly, and the track was also coming up as well as a result of the high temperatures. It was arguably the most demanding Grand Prix on the calendar. The drivers were not impressed by the track issues. However, that was not the reason that this event was taken off the schedule. It was actually because the temporary pit lane was not up to the level necessary of hosting an F1 race, and that it would need to be improved according to FISA, the governing body. With that not forthcoming, F1 left. That wasn't the end of the track's life though. In its place, the kart series took the mantle of being the headline event for the Detroit Grand Prix. The track was exactly the same as how F1 left it, with the exception of the final chicane, which was now thrown in the dustbin. Unfortunately, this event was not a success financially for the city, and so 3 years into kart's tenure on the streets of Detroit, it was moved in 1992 to Belle Isle Park. One moment though that did happen during kart's day was an uncomfortable moment when Mario Andretti went into the back of a recovery vehicle, luckily at low speed, and thankfully unharmed. However, with the kart and Trans Am series, who were also racing at this track, no longer in town, it marked the end of the Detroit street circuit. I'll be honest, this circuit would probably work better as a track for hot lapping around rather than racing around. If it was replicated in a sim racing game, I imagine it would be good fun to race around in league races, etc. However, in real life, it doesn't produce a huge amount of overtaking. This though isn't the end for motorsport in the city of Detroit. A new circuit will be built there this year for the Indycar series. How will that go? Well, say what you think in the comment section down below, along with any other thoughts on this particular track, plus suggest any other street tracks you'd like to see featured in this series. However, that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching, and until the next video, be kind to each other and enjoy the rest of your day.